I opened the door to my tiny city studio, trying to balance a tray with the turkey on one arm. The place felt even smaller with everyone crowded inside. Brandon stepped in behind me, looked around one time, and said in a loud voice, "This is it? You really live in this shoebox." His words echoed off the walls, and I felt my face heat up right away. Kayla laughed and lifted her phone to film a quick clip. She told her followers she found the true meaning of minimalist living. Mom gave a small smile to pretend it was not rude, and Dad just shook his head. Brandon pushed past me toward the foldable table. "How do you even eat here? My pantry at home is bigger than this place." He made a show of squeezing between two chairs as if the room were a comedy stage. I carried a stack of plates to the hallway trash, trying to breathe. Brandon followed, probably to keep teasing me. But he suddenly stopped in front of the mailboxes. One small metal box was stuffed full of envelopes with my name on it. He frowned. "Why is your mailbox totally full if you are never home?" My hands froze. I had to decide if I was ready to answer. My mind slipped back to every Christmas of my childhood. Brandon was always the golden child. He got the newest bike, the newest computer, the newest everything. Our parents clapped and cheered for every good grade he brought home. They bragged about his sports trophies and later about his promotions at work. I was always the quiet one. They said I would figure myself out someday. I remembered our old house, warm and noisy, filled with people who saw Brandon as the shining star. They talked about his big house in the suburbs, his fancy kitchen, his strong career path. Then they looked at me and asked if I was still in that little place in the city. They never said it with kindness. When I moved out on my own, it felt like running away from constant comparison. I learned to live small and save everything I could. I grew used to silence because no one ever asked about my dreams anyway. I kept a huge part of my life secret from them. It was easier that way. They would not understand it. They might even crush it. Now Brandon stood in the hallway, waiting for me to explain the full mailbox. I still remember the day I found the studio apartment. It was the smallest unit in the oldest building on the block. The walls were a strange yellow color, and the floor squeaked everywhere I stepped. But the rent was low, and the building sat between two bus lines. I could walk to work in 10 minutes. That mattered more than looks. The landlord at the time, Mr. Lawson, offered me a discount if I helped with small tasks. I said yes right away. I did not care about how the place looked. I cared about opportunity. Friends teased me for living in what they called a closet. But around that time I found house hacking blogs and real estate forums. I read them every night after work. Something clicked inside me. My tiny home did not need to be a symbol of failure. It could be a stepping stone if I used it right. I promised myself that this apartment was part of a plan, not a sign that my life was stuck. My family never asked why I stayed here. They just assumed it meant I had not grown up. They did not know the truth behind my choices. Thanksgiving was never supposed to be at my place. Brandon had bragged for months that he would host a real holiday meal in his big house with his perfect kitchen. He wanted everyone to see how well he was doing. Then, 2 weeks before the holiday, he called me out of the blue. He said his oven had broken. He said hosting would be too hard. Then he added that since I did not have kids or real responsibilities, it made more sense for everyone to come to my place. I held the phone tight, feeling my face warm. He made it sound like my time mattered less than his. Mom gently pushed me to say yes. She said Brandon was under stress from a second mortgage. She asked me to help the family. I agreed, even though I already had a secret appointment with someone near the building earlier that day. I was not about to cancel it. As the date got close, I felt something changing in me. I knew deep inside that this Thanksgiving might be the last time I let them treat me like the leftover child. I was tired of shrinking myself small. Thanksgiving morning turned into a show. Brandon swung open every door in my tiny place to point and laugh. "Here is her walk-in mansion," he said as he opened the small closet. He pointed at my pull-out sofa and joked about adult sleepovers. Mom blushed. I felt my chest tighten. Kayla kept filming everything for her followers. I asked her not to post, but she only shrugged. Dad said I should talk to Brandon about getting real estate advice since he thought I would have moved up by now. I kept quiet. Every comment felt sharp, like knives in the air. They loved making me the joke. I swallowed every feeling so they would not see how much it hurt. Their voices filled the room, loud and proud, while I tried to disappear into the background. Inside, I wanted to scream the truth at them. I wanted to tell them what I really owned, what I had really built. But I bit my tongue so hard that it almost hurt more than their words. I was not ready to speak yet. Dinner felt tight and hot, with everyone squeezed around the small foldable table. Knees bumped into each other and the oven heat filled the air. I tried to focus on the food I had cooked all morning, but Brandon lifted his glass and spoke over everyone. "I want to give thanks for what we have," he said. Then he gave me a long look. Avery must feel the most thankful since she only has 4 walls to clean. His smile was bright and sharp. Everyone laughed except me. Mom told him to be nice, but even she smiled a little. Dad sighed and poked at his plate. The laughter rolled over me like waves, and I felt myself fold smaller inside. Brandon continued bragging about his bonus, his new grill, his large backyard, and his SUV. He talked as if he needed an audience to clap for him every 5 minutes. Kayla filmed him again and again. I served the turkey and tried to keep my hands steady. Then Brandon said in a very loud voice that I could stay in his garage if I ever got tired of living in my little dollhouse room. Everyone heard it. No one stopped him. Inside me, something cracked. I felt anger rise in my throat, sharp and hot. Before I could swallow it, the words slipped out. I told Brandon that a garage in the suburbs sounded colder than my tiny home in winter. My voice shook, but I held his eyes. For the first time that night, the table went silent. Kayla slowly lowered her phone. Mom tried to change the subject by asking if the cranberry sauce needed more sugar. Dad looked at me with a strange expression, almost like he finally saw me as a person who could speak up. Brandon frowned and opened his mouth to fire back, but he closed it again when he saw I was serious. I had never talked back to him before. Not once. I always kept the peace. I always took the blame. But not this time. I felt something new inside me, something steady. It was the feeling of not bending anymore, of not shrinking to make others feel bigger. I did not plan to explode or ruin the day. I only knew one thing. I could not stay silent forever. This moment was the start of something I did not fully understand yet. After dinner, I escaped into the small corner of my studio that I used as an office. I opened my laptop and checked the emails I had hidden from everyone. The subject lines looked bright on the screen. They carried words like the building address and the letters LLC after my name. There were messages from a property attorney and a bank. Another email came from a development company that wanted to send a revised offer. As I scrolled, I saw old notes and spreadsheets I had made late at night. They listed repair costs, rental income, and updates for each tenant. I whispered to myself that no one in my family knew about this part of my life. I kept it private because I knew they would doubt me. They would laugh or try to control my choices. My silence protected my dream. I hovered my mouse over the newest email. The title read Revised Offer Before Year End. It made my heart thump harder. The numbers inside could change everything for me and for the people who lived in my building. But I had not told my family the truth. Not yet. It was easier to hide success than to defend it. I returned to the living area where Brandon was still talking. He complained about his mortgage, the price of daycare, and how hard it was to keep up with his bills. He said renters were wasting money and that buying a house was the only smart choice. He stared at me with a proud smile. He said I should stop playing city girl before I got too old to change my path. I almost laughed at how wrong he was. He thought he knew everything about success. Kayla sat beside him scrolling through photos of perfect living rooms online. She looked around my second-hand furniture with clear judgment. In that moment, I saw the truth about Brandon. He measured his whole life by size, money he could show off, and things that looked shiny. He did not see value in anything quiet or steady. I felt the room close in, and I reached for the trash bags. I needed a moment to breathe. I stepped into the hallway with the bags in my hands, hoping for fresh air and a little silence before I broke again. I did not know Brandon would follow me. I walked toward the line of mailboxes in the hallway. The metal doors were old and scratched, but familiar. I held the trash bags and tried to calm the sting from Brandon's words. He followed me, still talking about how I should move back home for a while to save money. He spoke like he was giving me wise advice. Then he stopped suddenly. His eyes locked on one mailbox. It was mine. It was stuffed full of letters and small padded envelopes. Some envelopes stuck out so far they looked ready to fall. My name was printed clearly on the metal tag. Right under it was another small label with the name of my company. Brandon leaned in and squinted. His voice grew quiet. "Why is your mailbox full? And what is this company name under yours?" I felt the air shift. My heart beat faster. For years I had hidden this truth. For years I chose silence. I looked at him, took a slow breath, and asked, "You really want to know?" His face slowly changed as he waited for my answer. This moment was the start of everything that would come next. I opened the mailbox door, and a pile of envelopes spilled into my arms. Some were folded from being crammed inside for too long. I bent down to pick up the ones that fell to the floor. Brandon stood frozen, watching me as if he did not understand what he was seeing. I held up an envelope so he could read the writing on the front. It was a rent check made out to my company. Another envelope held a holiday card from one of my tenants. A third envelope came from the bank with my company name printed in big letters. Brandon frowned. "So you work for the landlord now?" I took a steady breath. This was the first time I had ever spoken this truth out loud to him. "No, Brandon," I said. "I am the landlord. This entire building belongs to me." His mouth fell open. He stared at the old mailbox, then at the cramped studio behind me, and then at me again. He looked confused, almost as if the world he built in his mind could not hold this new information. I waited for him to ask another question, but he said nothing. He just stared. 3 years earlier, everything changed in a small office that smelled like old books and coffee. Mr. Lawson, the owner of the building, sat across from me with tired eyes. He told me he wanted to retire and spend more time with his grandchildren. He said the building needed work, and no big buyers wanted it. The units were too small, the paint was old, and the neighborhood was not fancy enough. I felt a strange courage rise inside me. I had spent nights reading about real estate. I knew a seller finance deal could work if someone trusted me. So I made an offer. I promised a small amount of money at the start and monthly payments after that. Mr. Lawson studied me for a long time. Then he smiled and said yes. I worked 3 jobs. I said no to every vacation. I packed lunches, saved every coin, and fixed things in the building myself to keep costs low. It was hard, but it felt right. When I signed the papers, no one was there to clap. No one knew I had become the owner. I walked home alone, holding the keys in my pocket, feeling both scared and proud. I walked through the building in my mind, thinking about the people who lived in each unit. They were more than names on envelopes. They were stories I cared about. There was Mrs. Alvarez, the night nurse who always brought home leftovers for her neighbor. She once cried in relief when I fixed her leaky sink the same day she asked. There was Malik, the single father who always paid rent early. His young son drew me pictures with little stick figures holding hands. 2 grad students lived on the 4th floor. They balanced books, jobs, and dreams of better careers. I tried to keep the rent fair, even when other landlords raised prices. People wrote letters thanking me for not pushing them out. Some envelopes in my mailbox held small gifts like homemade cookies or tiny art pieces. They kept me going on hard days. When I looked at the stuffed mailbox earlier, my eyes landed on a small envelope with a turkey drawn in shaky crayon. It was from Malik's son. Inside it said, "Thank you for our warm home." That message was worth more than any trophy or fancy house. It reminded me why I made the choices I did. Back in the hallway, I pulled out the newest envelope with a thick folder inside. I opened it carefully. The numbers stared back at me like bright lights. The offer from the development company was much higher than before. It was more money than I had ever seen written on one page. Brandon leaned over my shoulder before I could stop him. His eyes widened. He whispered a low sound that almost sounded like surprise mixed with greed. In seconds, he began talking about all the things I could buy. A bigger home. A new car. Investments. Then he said I should think about helping him first, since he had kids and more pressure. His words rolled out fast and sharp. I felt his old attitude returning, the one where he believed he knew better than me. I closed the folder and looked straight at him. My voice stayed calm, even though my heart beat fast. "You do not get to tell me what to do with this," I said. Brandon blinked hard. He seemed shocked that I would say something like that. This was the first time he saw that I had power he could not control. I sat down at my desk and read the offer again. The number was huge, but the fine print made my chest tighten. If I accepted, all the tenants would have to move out soon, right after the holidays. The thought of Mrs. Alvarez rushing to find a new home or Malik's son changing schools suddenly made my stomach twist. For a moment, I almost closed the folder for good. I could not stand the idea of hurting people who trusted me. Brandon walked in and said I should stop thinking so much. He said this was how real estate worked. He acted like feelings had no place here. His words made something clear. Brandon would push out anyone to win. He would never choose kindness over money. I refused to become that kind of owner. I sat still, thinking. I knew I might walk away from this deal. I also knew there might be another choice. I looked down at the folder again and felt a spark in my chest. I whispered to myself that I would find a way to win without hurting anyone. This moment was the beginning of a new plan. That night, I stayed awake long after everyone left. I sat at my small desk with only the soft light of my lamp. I opened my laptop and began typing a reply to the development company. I was not ready to say yes or no. I wanted a different path. I wrote that if they wanted my building, they had to give relocation help to every tenant. They had to allow longer move-out times so families would not suffer. They also had to offer a right of first option so tenants could return when the new building was ready. And I asked for a higher price. My attorney warned that I might lose the deal. Big companies like to move fast and cheap. They did not want extra costs. But I felt calm. I was not fighting for myself alone. I was fighting for people who had trusted me. I read the message one more time. My finger hovered for a moment, then I pressed send. The email whooshed away. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Whatever came next, I knew I had done the right thing. This was the first time I truly felt like the kind of owner I wanted to be. The next morning the air in my apartment felt different. Brandon sat at my tiny kitchen table making coffee like he lived there. He smiled too much and asked soft questions about my investment project. His voice sounded sweet, but I knew it was not real. He kept mentioning how proud he was of me, then slipped in a comment about how people sometimes need help with big money choices. He asked about the new offer amount. He said he could guide me since he had bought a house before. He made it sound like I still needed him to explain everything. I listened quietly. It surprised me how fast his tone had changed. For years, he mocked my choices. Now he acted like he wanted to be part of my plans. But I knew the truth. He respected the number on the offer page, not my years of hard work. When he asked again if I wanted his advice, I told him I had hired professionals. His smile fell a little. His jaw tightened. He looked almost insulted that I had not chosen him. For once, I did not shrink back. I sat tall. I felt a strange strength growing inside me. 3 days later, an email arrived from the development company. I saw the name in my inbox while I was at work. My hands shook a little as I clicked it open. They accepted my conditions. They agreed to relocation help, longer move-out times, and a higher price. They wanted the property before another buyer stepped in. I read the email twice to make sure it was real. Then I stepped into a quiet stairwell and let tears roll down my cheeks. Not tears of fear. Tears of relief. I had stood my ground. I had protected my tenants. I had won for them and for myself. I took a deep breath and opened my phone. My fingers moved before my mind caught up. I sent a message to the family group chat. I wrote, "I need everyone at Mom and Dad's house this Sunday. I have something important to tell you." My heart beat fast after I pressed send. This meeting would change everything in our family. I was ready for it now. Sunday came with clear skies and quiet streets. I reached my parents' house with a folder in my hand. Brandon walked in behind me, telling Kayla he was sure I needed help or wanted a partnership. Mom looked nervous. She asked if I was moving back home. Dad stood beside her, calm and thoughtful. I sat at the table and placed the folder in front of me. My hands did not shake. Brandon reached for it right away, as if it belonged to him. Dad put his hand over the folder first and said, "Let her talk, Brandon." That one sentence shocked everyone. The room went silent. I opened the folder and showed them the sale agreement. Brandon leaned in so far that he almost pushed me aside. Mom covered her mouth and whispered something like a prayer. Dad read the papers slowly, carefully, with a serious look in his eyes. They all waited for me to explain. For the first time in my life, they looked at me with real attention. I felt a deep breath rise inside me. This was my moment to speak my truth. I told them the building was sold. I explained the protections I had added for the tenants. Mom kept asking if this was safe and if Brandon had checked the numbers. I shook my head and turned to Dad instead. I pulled out a letter from the bank. It said their old mortgage, the one they struggled with for years, could be paid in full. I told them I had already started the payment process as a gift. I remembered all those late notices they hid from me when I was young. I remembered how scared they used to look. Mom gasped and touched her heart. Brandon blinked as if he had lost his place in the story. His mouth opened, but no words came. Dad stood up slowly. His eyes were wet. He placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "You are the bravest person in this room." No one had ever said anything like that to me before. I felt something warm spread through my chest. Brandon stayed quiet. He finally saw that the leftover child he teased had grown into someone he did not understand. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Dad sat down again and looked at me as if he was seeing a new person. Mom wiped her eyes and kept asking why I had never said anything before. Brandon stared at the table with a strange mix of confusion and anger on his face. I took a deep breath. It was time to speak the truth I had carried for years. I told Brandon that every joke he made about my tiny home had hurt me. I told him that he used me as the easy target in the family, the one person he could tease to make himself feel bigger. I reminded him of the times he laughed at my clothes, my job choices, and even my dreams. I felt my voice shake, but I did not stop. No one laughed this time. No one covered it up. They listened. I told them I was done being the family joke. I said that if anyone ever spoke about my life like it was nothing, I would walk away without another word. I felt light after saying it, free in a way I had never felt. Brandon looked at me as if he did not know who I was anymore. Later, Brandon followed me into the kitchen while Mom and Dad stayed in the living room talking softly. He leaned on the counter where we used to snack together as kids. His voice sounded unsure as he said he was sorry for the things he had said. But then he added that maybe we could work together now. Maybe I could help him fix his growing money problems. Maybe I could invest in his plans or cover part of his debt for the sake of the children. The moment he said that, I understood everything. His apology had a condition. He still saw me as someone who should help him more than I helped myself. I took a long breath and told him I was willing to share advice and point him toward real financial help, but I would not give him money. Not this time. He grew upset. He said I was acting too good for the family now and that I had forgotten where I came from. I looked at him without fear. I said I remembered exactly where I came from. That was why I had learned to stand on my own. He walked away with a hurt look, but I did not bend this time. That night, after I got home, I sat on my couch and thought about everything that had happened. I felt proud, but also tired. Then I did something I had never tried before. I recorded a late-night voice note for a story platform. I spoke about Thanksgiving, the mailbox, and the moment my world shifted. I changed the names, but I told the truth. I talked about how small I felt that day and how heavy the mockery had been. I spoke about the fear of sharing my success and the strength it took to stand up in front of my family. It felt strange to let strangers hear my heart, but also safe in some way. The story went live quietly. I did not expect anyone to care. But by the next evening, comments poured in. People wrote about their own golden child siblings. Others shared stories of being treated like background characters in their own families. Some talked about their own mailbox moments, where their quiet work finally became visible. They thanked me for saying words they wished they could say. As I read the comments, I felt seen in a way I had never felt before. 1 year later, I hosted Thanksgiving again. But this time it was in a bright, warm condo with sunlight on every wall. I chose it because it made me feel open and free, not because I wanted to impress anyone. The space was not huge, but it felt like mine in every way. Brandon and Kayla arrived with dishes they had cooked themselves. They set them on the counter without jokes about space or furniture. Brandon kept his eyes soft and careful, as if he was trying not to repeat the past. Kayla even complimented the color of my living room walls. Mom and Dad moved around easily, laughing in the kitchen and offering to help with everything. They looked lighter, almost younger, without the heavy weight of the old mortgage. We sat at the table together with more peace than I remembered us ever having. No one teased me. No one compared me. No one made me feel small. Near the end of the meal, Brandon cleared his throat and thanked me for inviting them. His voice was quiet. I nodded and smiled. The power in our family had shifted, but in a gentle way, like a door opening instead of closing. After everyone left that night, I walked down to the lobby to check my new mailbox. The hallway was bright and calm. My mailbox held only a small set of letters. One envelope came from my attorney with the last documents from the sale. Another held a holiday card from my former tenants. The last letter came from my bank about a new investment project I might explore later. I held the letters and smiled. The mailbox was not overflowing anymore, but it still felt full of meaning. It reminded me of the long path I had walked quietly while everyone thought I was standing still. I opened the holiday card right away. Inside, there was a simple message from Malik and his son. It said, "Thank you for helping us find a better home." I placed it over my heart. I looked at the other letters and decided to open them later. My life no longer needed to be proved by a mailbox stuffed with envelopes. My worth did not depend on anyone seeing it. I closed the metal door gently and whispered to myself, "My life may look small to some, but I know exactly how big it really is." Then I walked away feeling complete.